Deep in the searing plains of Darfur, under a relentless sun, the earth is bleeding. Not red, but gold. Here, in makeshift pits and crude trenches, an army of ghosts toil in the dust. They are the invisible, the forgotten, the 2 million artisanal miners digging for survival in Sudan. They work with bare hands and rusted tools, chasing glimmers of hope in the rock. But they are not digging for themselves. Every fleck of gold they find, every gram they painstakingly extract, becomes fuel for a fire that is consuming their nation, a war machine disguised as a paramilitary force known as the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. This is the story of how a precious metal, a symbol of wealth and beauty, became the currency of conflict. It's the story of a hidden pipeline, stretching from the war-torn heart of Africa to the gleaming skyscrapers of the Middle East. A pipeline that funnels billions of dollars in illicit gold to arm a militia, enrich a warlord, and prolong a devastating civil war. This is the story of how gold, Sudan's most valuable resource, became its deepest curse. The man at the center of this empire is a former camel trader turned warlord, Lieutenant General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known to the world as Hemedti. His rise was meteoric, built on a foundation of brutal tactics and shrewd alliances. In 2017, his forces seized one of Sudan's most lucrative gold mines, a sprawling area called Jebel Amer. He once dismissed it as just an area in Darfur that belongs to us, but Jebel Amer was the cornerstone. It was the beginning of a billion-dollar empire that would transform his militia from a desert patrol into one of the most formidable forces in the region. Before the war, gold was already Sudan's lifeblood, making up 70% of the country's exports, a desperate replacement for the oil revenues lost when South Sudan seceded. But official channels were just a fraction of the story. Between 50 and 80% of Sudan's gold was already being smuggled out, a river of wealth flowing in the shadows. Hemedti and his RSF didn't just participate in this shadow economy, they mastered it. They built a vertically integrated enterprise, controlling everything from the mines themselves, patrolled by fighters with Kalashnikovs, to the front companies that would launder the profits. Then, in April 2023, the uneasy alliance between Hemedti's RSF and the official Sudanese armed forces shattered. Khartoum, the capital, became a battlefield. The simmering power struggle exploded into open war. For Hemedti, gold was no longer just a source of wealth. It was the essential fuel for his bid for total control. In the opening salvos of the war, one of his first moves was to seize back the Jebel Amer mine. Weeks later, his fighters marched on the national gold refinery in Khartoum, a brazen heist. They walked away with what the government estimated to be 1.3 tons of unrefined gold and 15 tons of silver, worth a staggering $150 million. The message was clear. The war would be fought not just with bullets, but with bullion. The RSF's strategy is brutally simple. They control the source. In the vast ungoverned territories of Darfur and Kordofan, they are the law. Miners, many of whom have been digging for generations, now work at the barrel of a gun. They are forced to sell their gold through RSF channels, often for a pittance. Some RSF units even engage directly in mining, preying on the local populations they claim to be fighting for. The miners are trapped. The official army accuses them of collaborating with the RSF, while the RSF offers them no protection, only exploitation. They are caught in the crossfire of a war funded by the very earth beneath their feet. From these desolate mines, the gold begins a clandestine journey. Before the war, Hemedti could simply fly his gold directly out of Khartoum's international airport, often using the VIP lounge to bypass customs. But with the airport destroyed, the RSF had to innovate. They carved new arteries of illicit trade, weaving through the porous borders of a fractured region. One route runs west, through Chad. Another snakes south, into South Sudan, where a luxury private jet can be chartered to carry hundreds of pounds of gold, worth tens of millions of dollars, in a single trip. Another major pipeline flows north into Libya, a hub for gold trafficking, and then onward to Turkey and Dubai. A fourth, highly lucrative route crosses into Egypt, where a vast network of smugglers, security officials, and border guards facilitate the flow. The human cost of this trade is invisible to the end buyer. Refugees fleeing the conflict are sometimes forced to pay their smugglers in gold, each person carrying a piece of the war with them, becoming unwilling mules in a vast criminal enterprise. Ultimately, almost all of this gold, part of an estimated 2,500 tons of undeclared gold from across Africa, worth over $115 billion between 2012 and 2022, ends up in one place: the United Arab Emirates. Dubai, with its sprawling gold souks and lax regulations, has become the world's foremost laundromat for conflict minerals. Here, the blood-soaked gold from Darfur is melted down, refined, and stamped, its origins erased. It enters the legitimate global market, indistinguishable from any other gold, ready to be shaped into jewelry, stored in vaults, or traded on international exchanges. The UAE's role is more than just a passive destination. According to UN experts and multiple international reports, it has become a critical logistical hub for the RSF, providing a pipeline for weapons and supplies, often under the guise of humanitarian aid. It's a simple, devastating exchange. Gold for guns. Drones, missiles, and ammunition flow into Sudan, while untraceable bars of gold flow out. Front companies, many controlled by Hemedti's own relatives and sanctioned by the United States, operate openly in the Emirates, managing the financial side of the war. The UAE has repeatedly denied arming either side, yet the evidence on the ground tells a different story. This cycle of gold for weapons has created a perverse incentive for the conflict to continue. Peace is bad for business. While Sudan starves with 25 million people facing acute hunger, the war economy is booming. The production of gold has actually surpassed pre-war levels. The fighting generals have become the new power brokers in a global illicit trade, their influence extending far beyond Sudan's borders. They have forged alliances with other shadowy actors, including Russia's Wagner Group, now rebranded as Africa Corps, who have provided military expertise in exchange for a cut of the gold profits, a vital revenue stream to fund Russia's own war in Ukraine. The scale of the operation is staggering. In 2024 alone, a UN report estimated that $860 million worth of gold was extracted from RSF-controlled mines in Darfur. This is money that could rebuild a nation, feed its people, and establish a lasting peace. Instead, it pays for salaries, funds propaganda campaigns, buys the loyalty of other armed groups, and purchases the advanced weaponry needed to kill. It is the engine of a war that has displaced 11 million people and claimed tens of thousands of lives in mass killings and ethnic violence. The world has been slow to react. Sanctions have been placed on RSF-linked companies, but these are easily circumvented. New shell corporations appear overnight. The global gold market, with its complex and often opaque supply chains, is notoriously difficult to police. While regulators focus on paperwork, the reality on the ground is a luxury jet touching down in Juba, South Sudan, loading cases filled with $25 million in gold, smuggled from Darfur, and taking off before dawn for a private airport in the UAE. The manifest might list only a couple of passengers, one a relative of General Hemedti, the other a senior intelligence officer from a neighboring country known as a hub for smuggled gold. It's a seamless transaction, a quiet flight that represents another nail in Sudan's coffin. The gold itself is a silent witness. It carries the residue of the mercury and cyanide used by miners, poisons that contaminate the land and water long after the gold is gone. It carries the weight of a nation's stolen future. For the men digging in the dust of Jebel Amer, the promise of gold is a lie. They see none of the wealth it generates. Their reward is polluted water, the constant threat of violence, and the knowledge that their labor is fueling the destruction of their own country. The hidden price of gold is paid not in dollars, but in lives. And as long as the world continues to buy without asking questions, the war in Sudan, funded by an endless river of smuggled gold, will have no end. Thank you for watching. To understand more about complex global issues like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your awareness is the first step towards change.